The National Curriculum Framework for the foundational stage is a gentle symphony composed for the most magical years of a child's life. Between ages 3 and 8, every smile, every story, every scribble rewires the mind, shaping pathways that last a lifetime. Like potters with soft clay, this framework guides with care, weaving play, love, and curiosity into the very roots of learning. It's not just curriculum, but the art of making every moment a building block of the future. And to walk us through this tender tapestry of early learning, we're honored to welcome Dr. Sujata Bhan from SNDT Women's University. With wisdom that enlightens and a heart devoted to inclusive learning, Dr. Sujata stands as a true pioneer in special education. In the next 25 minutes, she will elaborate on how to craft the future minds. A warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Sai Ram to everybody. I cannot begin to tell you how overwhelmed I'm feeling to be here. This is the first time for me to be in the summit. I have been to the ashram before, and I hope and I pray that I continue this journey from now onwards. Thank you so much to Sri Sathya Vidya Vahini for giving me this opportunity to be here and share my thoughts with you. So thank you once again. After having heard Professor Sridhar, the Sutradhar of National Education Policy, I feel very, very small, nervous, jittery. What can I talk about? I will try to make it very simple. As he mentioned, the document is huge, and most of us feel very intimidated to look at those huge documents. So I have pulled out a few highlights from there to do justice in my little way to this wonderful document and just share some highlights with you of National Curriculum Framework. Many of you are teachers here, so am I. I'm a teacher first, a teacher educator. So when we look at our classrooms, these are the kind of pictures we see today. So do you think your classroom should look like this, or should they look like this? What do you think? Yeah? The second picture, yes, when we make learning more fun, we want to shift our children from those air-conditioned classrooms sitting in front of the screen and feeling the privileged ones that our schools are really fancy. We are taking them away from nature, which teaches us so much. So we have to make a shift in our thinking, and that is what National Curriculum Framework is highlighting. But not to make it regressive, rather prepare our children to be more progressive in their thinking, be the critical thinkers, problem solvers, better communicators, all those skills we expect in our children of 21st century, but by not taking them away from nature and not just putting them in that box of technology. I may be sounding politically incorrect because we are in digital India and everywhere we see the advent of artificial intelligence, but many of you must have heard what Sweden is talking about, that let's do away with computers and artificial intelligence and bring our children back to what Madam Anupam just mentioned, indigenous approaches to education. Perhaps that will do much better to our children. I also want to say that look at where our society is going today. So it is important to go back to our roots and derive knowledge from there, and maybe in times to come, we will see our children developing into what the scenario was earlier when we used to talk about Guru, Shishya, Parampara, where we are kind of completely, dissociated from that. So I think national education policy, national curriculum framework, they're trying to bring us back to our roots. Now, why it becomes a point of concern is also because the National Achievement Survey done in 2021 says that the learning levels are low across class 3, 5, 8, and 10, with an average learning level of 59% in class 3, 49% in class 5, 42% in class 8, and 36% in class 10. So now the national education policy attempts to take efforts forward by making some fundamental changes in the structure of schooling itself. When we first saw the policy in 2020, we thought it was a fairy tale policy. Are they ever going to be, will it be humanly possible to implement it? But we see that when we aim for the moon, we won't end up with just a handful of mud either. So we may not have reached there yet, but we are on that pace. And in these 5 years, a lot of achievements have been done, a lot of milestones have been attained for the fulfillment of implementation of this national education policy. Now, since I'm talking about the foundational stage, it's very important to reiterate that the foundational years are critical for our brain development. 90% is developed in the early years, and only 10% develops after the age of 5. And NEP 2020 has, as was said earlier also, has put special emphasis on early childhood care and education, which was not stressed upon in our policies earlier. And the focus is on play-based education, activity-based education, focusing on communication, early language, foundational literacy, and numeracy. And earlier, somebody asked a question about the thrust of inclusion in this education policy. I feel that equitable and inclusive education is at the cornerstone of the national education policy. There may not be a specially designed chapter for that, because even me, myself included in that, initially we thought they are talking about socially, economically disadvantaged groups in the policy. So our children who have disabling conditions just form a small part of that. So maybe they will be overlooked or ignored. But no, I don't think so. So it is for us teachers to pull out from national education policy what we think we can implement very successfully to make our children more enabled. Because the policy definitely endorses all provisions of Rights for Persons with Disability Act 2016, and it talks about reasonable accommodation to accommodate every single child, not to leave anyone behind. Yes, it also talks about providing them what they need, like if a child needs a support system which may not be practically possible in a particular mainstream school, then don't do harm to the child by having them in that school unless they have a special educator or the support system required for that child. So NCERT has developed an index inclusion, which is again a very important tool which tells us whether we putting a child in an inclusive setting, is the child actually benefiting from that setting or not? We have to aim for that, but let it not remain a rhetoric. Let it become practically possible, which again Professor Anupam focused upon. Now we see that there is a paradigm shift in this policy that guides the national curriculum framework. It talks about transition to more multidisciplinary and holistic education. It talks about transition to an emphasis on critical and analytical thinking. It focuses on transition to a new curricular pedagogical structure. It talks about early identification and addressing of developmental delays and disabilities. When we are looking at early years, catch them young. So we get that opportunity to identify those children who are at risk and help them through intervention. And the earlier traditional method of teaching is kind of obsolete now. So we look at innovative methods of teaching and innovation in curriculum transaction. National curriculum at the foundational stage is divided into 3 to 6 years, which includes early childhood education programs in Anganwadis, Balvatikas, or what we call the preschools, and 7 to 8 years early primary education program, that is grade 1 and grade 2. So when we talk about 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, this is the focus of first 5 years. There is a strong theoretical base of national curriculum framework when this was developed for the foundational stage. All our educationists, right from Mahatma Gandhi to Piaget to Frederick Froebel, Rudolf Reggio, Vygotsky, Erickson, all of them. It's not made, the policy is not made in thin air. It has a strong theoretical basis which focuses again on how children learn from nature, how children learn by doing, how insightful learning is more important than rote learning. And the tenets of National Curriculum Framework for foundational stage, again, highlights that every child is different and grows, learns, and develops at her own pace. I have a simple analogy here. The sun gives us light, the moon also gives us light. So both are shining at different times. We have to give them that space to shine. So every child has to be given that opportunity to create a niche for himself or herself. Children learn best when they are respected, valued, and fully involved in the learning process. This, again, that sense of belonging for a child in any class that the child is in is very, very crucial for his self-esteem and for blossoming to his fullest potential. Children learn through play and activity by exploring and experimenting with the environment, so the focus on play is tremendous in this stage of foundational years. Children must engage with materials, activities, and environment that are developmentally and culturally appropriate. So the policy, the framework is very appropriately developed, keeping the cognitive developmental milestones in mind. Care and safety is very, very critical, so we have to make sure that the environment is very caring and conducive for the child's development. And teachers are facilitators for learning, and family and community play a very, very significant role as per this framework. The focus on the early years is on the physical and motor development, cognitive development, socio-emotional and ethical development, communication, early language and literacy, and numeracy. And our national education policy, and so the national curriculum framework, is rooted in Indianness. So as I said earlier, we have to go back to our roots. So they have given a holistic development of a child in these layers, what they call the panchakoshas. So we have the physical layer, which is the Annamaya Kosha, intellectual layer, which is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, mind layer, which is the Manomaya Kosha, life force energy, which is Pranamaya Kosha, and the inner self development, which is Anandamaya Kosha. The idea is that we go back to our roots, we understand our culture, and we teach keeping that philosophy in mind and provide a strong base to our children. And it's all basically, I would say, correlating with the emotional development, cognitive development. And when we talk about education, we sometimes focus mostly on the cognitive aspect. We overlook the affective domain. So National Curriculum Framework brings us back to what Mahatma Gandhi, for example, highlighted, our heart and our hand and our mind, bring that all together. That will lead to holistic development. So play is very important according to this framework, and that will ignite the wonder and joy in creating, in thinking in our children. So encourage that wonderment. And again, I'm not going to read it all, but I'm just going to give you a glimpse that it highlights how play has to be, again, done in a manner which is free play, guided play, structured play. What is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the children in that? So that that very important aspect, that is learning through play, is strengthened in our children, and they learn through that. Another very beautiful thing in this curriculum framework is where they talk about what is the domain, what we may call the discipline or the subject. And for each domain, we have curricular goals and we have competencies. These are the words which are highlighted in this curriculum framework, and then we have learning outcomes. The focus of developing this curriculum framework is revolving around this. That is the domain, the curricular goals, the competencies the child must develop, and the learning outcomes. Now, at the end of every stage, which again we heard earlier, that there are curricular goals that need to be achieved and there are competencies that we need to see in our children. But at every end of the year, there are certain learning outcomes which all children must achieve. Now, just briefly, what are the curricular goals? They are the statements that give direction to curriculum development and implementation. Competencies are the skills, abilities, and attitude to do an activity, and learning outcomes are learning achievement towards the attainment of these competencies. Again, to give you one example, if the domain is physical development, that is the Annamaya Kosha, there are a number of goals listed. It's right from the framework I've taken this example. So there are a number of goals listed for that particular domain, and there are a number of competencies to achieve that curriculum goal. Just to list one, for example, children develop habits that keep them healthy and safe. So the competencies they will develop healthy eating habits. The point I wanted to highlight here is that there's a beautiful flow from the domain to the goal to the competency and finally to the learning outcomes which are listed for every age group. Again, to give you one example, for 3 to 4 years, for curriculum competency of first, name some healthy and some unhealthy food items. At the age of 4 to 5, he identifies healthy and unhealthy food items. From 5 to 6, he names some qualities of good, nutritious food. 6 to 7 years, identifies major ingredients in familiar food and health. And in 7 to 8 years, guesses ingredients, cooked food, and says whether they are good or bad for him or her. Again, just to highlight that how beautifully each thing has been spelled out for the ease of the teachers to be able to implement in the classroom. Simply again, if the domain is cognitive development, the curricular goal, for example, is children make sense of the world around them through observation and logical thinking. The competency that they need to develop is observe and understand different categories of objects and relationships between them, and the learning outcome is makes connections between objects and their uses. Now, what is the role of the teacher? If we've all read Vygotsky's theory, we know about the zone of proximal development. It is based on that. It's again from the National Curriculum Framework that we have to support the children to become independent learners, making them competent learners and not dependent learners. So we gradually wean ourselves from the child. So first the teacher explains, so I demonstrate, then we do it together with the child, then we let the child do it and we are giving guided practice, and finally they are able to do it alone. That is, the student takes the responsibility because we want him to become the independent learner. And the learning process is, again, described in the framework, right from introduction to understanding, to practice, to application, to sharing, that we begin by introducing something to take him to the journey where he's able to share that information with others. Similarly, a lot of emphasis is given on the pedagogy, how the curriculum should be transacted in the classroom. Again, I've given few examples here. For example, the domain is social, emotional, and ethical learning through activities in art, music, etc., stories that center on emotions, discuss them, enact them through facial expressions, so that we again instill that effective domain in the child, empathy in the child, right from the young years. We are teaching language, again, through innovative methods, through storytelling, poem recitation, writing about experiences, focusing on the language that the child understands. Again, national education policies focusing on mother tongue. So the language that the child understands, we have to have that kind of bilingual conversations in class. Coming to the assessment bit. Now, again, the National Curriculum Framework goes away, deviates from the traditional method of assessment, and to include everybody and to help them according to the need that they have, they've divided into 4 categories: the beginners, the progressing, the proficient, and the advanced. So level 1 is when we say beginner, they try to achieve the learning outcomes with the teacher's support. And then in level 2, what we call progressing, they achieve the learning outcomes with teacher's support in a given time frame. And level 3, that is proficient, that the child is able to achieve the learning outcome on their own. And level 4, they achieve the learning outcome, help and support others to achieve the learning outcome, and they're also moving to advanced level, so that we call them the advanced learners. Somebody talked about gifted, so that is how they're bringing in the gifted also into the periphery, that if a child is gifted, if he is so proficient, we give them more challenging tasks to help him develop even further. Now, the components of teaching plan, or when the teacher is planning to go in the class, the teacher herself has to be very clear about what are the goals of what she's going to teach, what is the competency that the child will develop at the end of the class, and what will be the learning outcome that needs to be achieved. So the teacher has to very thoughtfully choose the content and material to be used in the activities, plan child-led activities which are developmentally appropriate, design classroom arrangement, like are you going to make them sit in groups, or we have a theater-like setting like this. Depending upon the activities that you have planned, you will make the physical arrangement of the classroom. Plan for specific strategies for children who are lagging behind, and plan different innovative methods of assessment, go beyond the traditional methods of assessment. Portfolio assessment has been really highlighted in the National Curriculum Framework, where we are not competing with each other. The children are not set into that competition kind of a mindset. We just see how they are developing themselves from one point to the other in their own journey of learning. So holistic progress card is what is highlighted. It's a multidimensional report that reflects in great detail the progress as well as the uniqueness of each learner in their cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. So not to just, again, focus only on the cognitive domain, but on other domains as well. It may contain not just the assessments done by the teacher, but the child does his own reflection, the parents give their input, and that will make it completely comprehensive. Parents play a very important role, so we should know what do the child's parents do, how much time do they spend with their child, what does the child do at home, to what extent do parents assist them in their studies. To have a complete understanding of every single child, we must know their ecology. This comes from the Bronfeld-Benner's theory that if we want to understand our children, we have to understand where they are coming from. For a teacher, the first thing is to know every child's name in their class, and then to know their backgrounds. That will bring her to understand and form a relationship between the parent and the child and herself. So when the three come together, that's when the learning will be the best. Many a times we see in today's time, the parents are more concerned about the homework, that what homework is the teacher giving to the child. My child is not writing, but such and such child is writing. They put tremendous pressure on the teachers, asking them for homework for the children. So we have to change that mindset. We have to tell the parents that they are too young to sit and write. What should they rather do? Look around your house and see the color and shapes of plants. Walk with your parents after dinner. Serve a glass of water to all family members. So on. Basically, get them engaged in the home, in doing activities which instill that basic value of empathy, respect, and love in them. Foundational years are the crucial years. If we sow the seed right, if we nurture it right, they will grow to adults who are inclusive in their mindset, and there will be a society which will be inclusive in the true sense of the word. I want to share a small film here with you. It is a message for teachers. It's a film produced by Singapore Association, Dyslexia Association, and I think that it's very touching to see this and understand the child's perspective to their education. And we as teachers take it from there and see what we can do to make a difference in each child's life. It's a lovely film that communicates a lot, that we have to have the empathy, the love for each and every child in our class, and if we teach them the way they learn, they will all learn and they will all blossom to the maximum of their potential. That is the mantra that we have to believe in. So it is the teacher who's ultimately the torchbearer. The whole responsibility, the whole onus is on us to make the change that we want to see.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your words truly echoed the core of this beautiful vision. And for the felicitation, I invite Srimati Vijaya Vaidyalingam and Srimati M. Kavita.